Hey everybody, my name is Jonathan Core, and in today's marketing talk, I'm going to be talking to the senior account-based marketing manager for a SaaS company called Icertis in Bellevue, Washington. My guest, Jason Hinojosa, has been in the marketing field for over 12 years now and has a history of working in fast growth startup environments. He was also formerly the marketing director for Here Seattle, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting an inclusive culture in tech. Thanks for hopping on this call, Jason.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jonathan.
Awesome. Well, let's kick this off. Obviously, like before we hit record and started, going through this actual official recording, we were talking about the pandemic and how that's been affecting, tons of people, yourself included, from an actual business standpoint. So I'm curious, would you mind just sharing how you've been, dealing with COVID, just quickly on like a personal level, as well as like even from a professional level as the account-based manager for iCertis?
Yeah, so I'll start on the professional level, and we'll dive into some of the personal stuff. But from a professional perspective, COVID kind of really was just a wrecking ball that kind of just like destroyed, or just basically destroyed all marketing plans anybody had at the beginning of 2020. I think from an overall perspective, demand started to be, especially in the B2B space, given where we are in the economy, and what was having to happen with the shutdowns, like a lot of just a lot of marketing plans changed. I mean, targets changed, demand changed, deals that you thought you might have been closed or abruptly closed. You thought you might have been able to work through were like abruptly closed, and there was just a lot of change, and a lot of that was coming from just a big level of uncertainty in the air. And so, for our side, a big part of it was just, readjusting our ideas into, what made sense now in this sort of post-COVID world. And you could imagine in those first couple of months, like nobody knew what that was. So it was just, we kind of, at Icertis, we kind of had this saying of staying loose in the saddle, and, day to day, week to week, things would change. And it was just this idea that you don't have to worry about being, staying true to your marketing plan or staying true to the targets you set even a month ago. That this whole thing that's happening, it's like we're in this whole big level of uncertainty, and let's just try to figure and navigate our way out of that. But I would say, kind of post COVID, and now that that this kind of seems like it's going to be our new normal, it's actually kind of it's actually been really refreshing. I feel a lot of things, obviously, because of the climate, have moved digital. And as the digital and ABM marketer, that's always like a positive sign for us. And then I think people in other companies are starting to understand what the world, like how to navigate in this world, and things are starting to become I think the scare and the nervousness everyone had at the very beginning is kind of starting to calm down a little bit, and people were able to start making decisions. And buying cycles have opened back up, but now just everything has switched to the digital space. So in that world, I think CPL, cost per leads, and just like the competition's gotten higher, but it's also forcing marketers to up their game in digital. Now that everybody's moving to the digital space, it's like what used to work last year and what worked in January and early February no longer works anymore. Just this very saturated market. So it's forcing people to be creative to try to figure out how to stand out in this busy marketplace. And then on the personal front, I think it kind of falls along the same lines. The first couple of months were very uncertain, and there's a lot of things to process. And as time's kind of gone on, you at least for me, it was just adjusting to what this was, and a big part is like working from home, and what does working from home look like? What does collaboration look like when everybody's in separate offices? And so it's like, it was a big learning curve of like, how do you replicate what you did in the office for so long now in the digital space with everybody working at home? And how do you
Yeah.
carve out those spaces?
Yeah, no, that's good. And I'm curious, just real quick. You had mentioned it's, and I agree. It's, becoming oversaturated. A lot of people are having to pivot, their overall marketing plan, marketing strategy, approach and focus. I'm curious, have there been any other, tech or SaaS companies out there that you've been seeing pivot really well, that you've gotten some inspiration or some ideas from?
Yeah, I have. So, I think one company has done a really good job, Airbnb experiences. So, and what I liked about what they did is, I wasn't, I've used Airbnb for a long time, and I've done a couple of their experiences, which are like the tools we can like, go do an art walk somewhere, or go learn about coffee culture, with somebody in the cities you go visit. And I think one interesting thing that they were able to do is make a pivot to start offering like digital experiences. And so I thought that from like a whole product perspective, when you realize, okay, now no longer people are going to be traveling, and what when your entire business model has completely shifted, how do you operate in that world? And I think they did a really good job with that pivot. And then locally, I think a company's been doing a really great job through all this has been the sales automation startup Outreach. And Outreach, they just, like they've been putting out some really great content, very especially in their world where they're talking to people every day who are affected by this, and they're trying to make sales, and their whole success of their company is based on them being able to connect with people in this world. And just the content they've put out, the online events they've been able to do, and even just like the organic posts their executive teams have been making, and just like this really high level of empathy, which I think is just something that's really refreshing and different than a lot of other companies have done.
Yeah, that's I completely agree with the outreach piece. I'm curious to look more into the Airbnb piece that you were saying, but I've been seeing Manny Medina post a lot of great content,
Yeah.
a lot of great news in the midst of a lot of uncertainty, which is really encouraging because it's, you're hearing about, different people for, being furloughed still and so much uncertainty. But in the midst of that, having a company, especially here local, just share some good news about, new board members, new executive team roles, like, and all these things. I think it's super encouraging.
Yeah, I think they just closed the funding round yesterday.
Yeah.
I was reading about
Which,
that. And then
which is huge.
exactly. So it's just, yeah, exactly. It's kind of one of those really great examples of like, you know, even though this, everything is happening, like business is picking back up, and it's business is kind of moving back to normal.
Yeah, for sure. So now kind of like, reversing, I guess, looking at your career from the starting point, we were talking before we hit record that you're initially from, Houston, from H-Town, from Texas. And so I'm curious, could you give us like a brief explanation of just kind of your career trajectory and how you eventually landed in Seattle, and then eventually working at, Icertis as the, I saw initially digital marketing manager, but eventually
Uh-huh.
grew into the senior account-based marketing manager.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So, as we were talking about, I graduated college last year. I mean, the last time we had a big major downturn and recession, 2008. My entire life I was, kind of told, you take these steps and then you graduate from college, and eventually then you go into a career. I was a marketing minor, a comm study major, and had this really grand ambitions of wanting to go into marketing right out of college. And I graduate, and really we're in a recession. Nobody's hiring, and the few places that are hiring are having hundreds of applicants because it was just a really tough space to get into. So at that point, I went and wanting to go into marketing. I figured like the best route of doing that. A friend and I, we started our own marketing agency. And we didn't know too much about what was happening. We didn't know what was needed, but we knew we had some skill sets, and we knew we could learn really quickly. And so I was like, the best thing I could do. I need 5 years experience to go into an entry level job. So the best thing I could do is create my own experience. And at that point, we first began focusing on like design and like logo design and branding and photography work for a lot of like energy and oil companies in Houston. And at the same time, started teaching myself through like Google and all of their analytics tools, just what digital marketing was. At this point, Facebook had just started to become a force. I don't even believe Instagram was out yet. Like this, social books, but Twitter had just become a thing, and like social media was really starting to rise. This whole digital, people didn't really understand what digital and how to like communicate on digital yet. So that I felt like that was like my inflection point of like, okay, this is new space. There's a lot of tools to learn here. Let me start learning that. And so that's when I really started to like dive into marketing, and I was able to leverage that experience. I did that for 2 years, and then was able to leverage that experience into a project management position with a small tech company in Houston that focused on print technology. And, while I learned a lot in PM was, project management was, an important skill set that I still use even to this day. My heart wasn't into it. I really still wanted to go back into marketing. I still wanted to do creative work. I still wanted to connect with people. That was really where I was. And still, I was having because now my experience was in PM work, I was having a hard time moving into marketing in Houston, and decided I was going to use education as like my jumping off point to get into marketing. So I started, researching MBA programs and different MBA programs at that. I didn't want to go to like your real traditional, B school, like, an HBS or, one of those types of schools, but, something that kind of brought together my interest in helping people and doing good with business, along with my interest in being marketing and digital, and found a school here in Seattle called Pinchot University. I think originally it was called Bainbridge Graduate Institute, and they focused on MBAs in sustainable business. So, their whole mantra, and this is now talking about climate change. This was now almost 8 years ago when I did the program and graduated 5 years ago. But, we're talking about the climate change, social justice issues. This was really a school looking to drive positive change through business. And they were kind of at the real forefront of that. And that's what brought me to Seattle. I applied there in 2012, got accepted, started in the fall of 2012. And at that point, I was so ready to leave Houston. Like, I'd been there my whole life. I really wasn't getting to where I wanted in my career. And I kind of saw, sort of like a Jack Kerouac book. I saw myself going out west as being the way to pursue my dreams. And so, as soon as I got accepted, I remember I was so happy. I even moved to Seattle like 3 months before school started, just to get here in the middle of the summer and, get my apartment together and explore the city and understand what was all here. And so I did do everything in my car, drove across country, didn't know anybody here in Seattle, didn't have a job, didn't have anything. And I just made a big bet on myself that, I would come here and I would, through brute force, make all my dreams come true. And then in that first summer, I lucked out and started working in a digital marketing position for, at the time it was Seattle Metropolitan Credit Union. Now it's Seattle Credit Union. And, they were just starting to build out, they had a really amazing marketing team with really great designers and really great marketers. But they were just starting to build out their digital, all of their digital marketing efforts. And try to grow using digital marketing. And so I was able to step in there pretty early on and take the skills I had from designing and marketing, from the agency that I started prior, and my project management skills from this other job, and kind of start to build out the digital world at Seattle Credit Union. And I was there for, throughout school, and I stayed on for like additional 4 years. I think staying there probably, total about 4 years. Worked a few different worlds in the digital space for a credit union, which is, always really fascinating, right? It's, you're helping people reach their financial freedom. But then, reached a point where I just wanted to go somewhere where I was moving faster. That's, one thing in the financial sector is there's not a lot of movement. They're larger, more established companies. So they're not growing at the speed, a tech startup would. And now that I was here and I was, where I was at, and I really felt confident in what I was doing, I then took that and started applying, found the job at Icertis. Still, we were a pretty small company. We had just found, the company had just found a real strong product market fit, and they were looking to scale. And I was like, the second digital marketer they had ever, and really was kind of designed to help, and kind of came in as part of the management team to grow the company. And I think I came in right at our Series C. I think the Series C launched my first week there. And now we're at Series E. The Icertis is, I think, valued a little over $1 billion. So, one of the Seattle unicorns, along with like Smartsheet and I don't think Smartsheet because they're public now, but along with Outreach and yeah, we just seen this tremendous growth over the last 3 years. And so, yeah, I was able to go in there, first help building out the digital marketing section, and then eventually transition to ABM. And now I'm in this world of kind of both, where I kind of straddle both worlds of digital and ABM.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you mentioned the switch from, the financial sector into tech. Like for me, from a marketing standpoint, I have more experience doing marketing for construction world, and that's for sure a lot more slow pace. Like there's a lot, it's not as aggressive and it's not as quick as, let's say like a tech company. So I'm curious, what was the switch like for you to go from a financial, industry and marketing right into tech? Like, was it really like fast paced, especially being given a, Series C by the point, you joined, or what was the workflow like?
Uh, you know, like everything, there were advantages and disadvantages, right? I think one thing that was really hard in the financial sector for marketing was the regulation. You had to, even though you weren't moving fast, you had to obsess over every single word you used and the disclosures that you set up and, what you say. And, every little thing you talk about and every campaign you gets scrutinized because of like just, NCUA and all of these other governing bodies, and making sure you're not, misleading your customers. So I think on one side, that can get frustrating where you have like momentum for an idea and then it gets slowed down through the approval process. So I actually enjoyed the faster pace. But then on the flip side, because we didn't have so much time to adjust, because we were moving faster, we didn't have as much time to obsess over every little word and every little pixel and every little. So, I feel like they kind of, really did hit two different worlds. But yeah, I mean, it definitely, the pace was probably the most, I would say was probably the most, the biggest differentiator between the two is, you were just expected to move at a lot faster of a pace, and that's and for me, like, that's really what I wanted. So I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed lifting up my sleeves and digging in deep and just saying that I know I'm going to fail a little bit, but I'm going to take every failure I have and I'm going to learn from it, and then I'm just going to move fast. And luckily with Icertis, there's such a great marketing team that I was given that freedom to fail a little bit at the beginning and make a little few mistakes, but because I learned and I did so much there that eventually you pick up, and this becomes this like tribal knowledge, and then you're able to succeed. And so from that, and then like the pace, I was just able to keep up with the pace, so that like it all kind of really came together. And I really do felt like tech was like my strong sweet spot.
That's awesome, especially given your trajectory moving, from Austin, finally wanting to leave home and just have something new, obviously like you mentioned in the West. And so if there's anybody out there that's curious on, pivoting into tech, they might be in retail, they might be in, finance, like or the financial sector. What are some of the tips you would recommend marketers, either start upskilling in or start, developing within their own portfolio to eventually, pivot into, more of a tech type position?
Yeah, great question. So, I think the best advice I can give anybody, wanting to get into a career in marketing is just try to develop as many skills as you can. I think regardless of the industry you're in, if you have design skills, you have a little bit of coding skills, how the digital marketing, how different digital marketing channels work, how to read reports on Google Analytics and be able to read a report and then take insights from it and then make something happen. Like, as long as you start to pick up these types of skills, like, everything else will just naturally come to you. Like, it really is a skill based, field. And, a lot of what I learned in marketing, I learned while also working retail. Retail or also working in a restaurant, or also working, doing these other things. And it was just, if you can pick up these skills and you can do them well, then no one can ever take that away from you. And whether you're doing marketing for a financial institution or a construction company or high growth SaaS startup or, whatever, those skills are always there. And it's just now at that point, it's just a matter of getting used to the company culture and making things move. But you'll always have those skills and no one can ever take them away from you. And wherever background you come from, whatever school you went to, if you have those skills and you're good at them, people will hire you because those skills are much needed.
Yeah, I think that's super powerful what you just said, mentioning like, nobody can take away the knowledge that you gain. So try and kind of be like a for lack of better, a sponge, just suction everything up. And I'm sure you're pretty familiar with kind of like the T-shaped marketer, like a breadth of knowledge, but then eventually you specialize in one specific area. So I'm curious with your position in particular, for the few of those out there who may not know, because there's so many different, like, especially now that marketing has, it's broadened just in general. And so just for the few of those out there that may not know what an account-based marketing manager does, what are what is that role? Why is it important? And what are kind of some of the day-to-day responsibilities you have?
No, exactly. A great question. So it's a very specific marketing role for B2B marketing, for business to business marketing. And, all digital marketing, I think originated in the B2C, business to consumer space. And so traditional marketing efforts, even with digital marketing, it kind of takes that what they call inbound approach. So just like if you were searching shoes on Google and you look at some shoes in Nordstrom and then you leave the page and it follows you around and you're like, okay, those are retargeting ads. This is all still really inbound approach. Inbound type of approach of marketing where someone shows interest in something and then you hit them with it. It's like, okay, you showed interest in this one thing. Now I'm going to follow you around with ads to get you what you were interested in. And that was the way marketing was done in digital all across. And then, I'll say about 4 or 5 years ago, what the trend that started to happen in the B2B space was knowing that, that works for some space, for some businesses, but especially in like SaaS business, and especially if you're dealing with large companies, like you're not trying to get someone to buy a pair of shoes. You're not trying to get someone to buy, a jacket. You're trying to get someone to buy, very, very expensive software that sometimes might take 3 or 4 or 5 levels of approval all the way up to your CEO. And you're not selling to a person, you're selling to a team of people. Someone on the finance team and someone on the legal team and someone on the procurement team, someone on the HR team, and there's these representatives. So what account-based marketing does is, it kind of starts off with, companies deciding, who are the companies they actually want to do business with. So you create these lists of companies and then you create marketing programs that are designed to engage those companies early so that when that company is ready to make that purchase, they think of you when they want to make, X purchase. So, and from a day-to-day, well, I think what's really awesome with with ABM is it mirrors a lot. There's a huge digital component to it. You're building specialized landing pages or a special, micro site for that one customer. This is McDonald's or Nike or Adidas. Any of these you're building these one for these sites. But then there's also this other component of it. Where you can do stuff that's offline marketing. Maybe it's a billboard outside the headquarters of T-Mobile. Maybe it's a dimensional mail piece, and you find out that the CEO of whatever of the company you want to work with, or the key decision maker of the company you want to work with, is a big Seahawks fan. So you send him a signed Russell Wilson football. You find these ways to like break into the account, and so a lot of it is. You're looking at, all the marketing activities you designed to go after these certain accounts, and you're looking for anomalies or engagement spikes of when those accounts are starting to pick up engagement and start to interact with your brand. And if you set it up correctly, you have these listening posts all over the place. So if they're following you on LinkedIn, or they're going to your website, or they responded to this one campaign, or they went to one of your webinars. You can see these, and it's almost like you're a puzzle master. You're putting together all these little pieces, and you're trying to say like, oh, hey, sales team, this, you know, this account, McDonald's, is showing a lot of engagement recently in the last month. I think you guys should reach out to them and try to sell them because they're showing a level of intent. So it's a lot of that. You're listening, you're listening to the sales team, you're listening to the customers, you're looking at the responses, and you're just trying to put the pieces together for everybody.
Wow, that sounds really interesting. I like the illustration of puzzle. You know, it's kind of like puzzle pieces, but kind of one thing that came to mind right away when you were describing it is kind of like chess. You know, if they move this way, we'll move this way. If they have, you know, some sort of response this way, we'll move this. You know, it's all based on intent, is what it sounds like.
It is.
So
That's a really good way of putting it too. I like that analogy, the chess analogy.
Yeah, it's like at first I thought of puzzles exactly the way, but I'm like, you know, you think about chess, like when somebody moves. I don't know if you've ever seen The Office, but
of course.
So like there was this one scene really quickly where Creed is playing chess with Jim, and basically like Jim moves one of his pieces, and then Creed is like, well, if you move there, I'm going to do this. If you move there, I'm going to do this. You don't want to move there, you know. And so I instantly thought of that right away as you were explaining that. But so I'm curious, what's been like your most like your favorite campaign that you've had for, you don't have to list, you know, specifically the client or the customer, but like what's been the most rewarding one where you're like, you just saw just so much momentum and then ultimately, you know, led to, you know, closing the sale?
Yeah. So it's been a couple, you know, I think, you know, most recently last year I ran as part of this, one of the first big ABM campaigns I ran was something called internally we called it the burner phone campaign. And, you know, it kind of falls a line, and, you know, we had these, you know, this certain set of these target accounts that, you know, we wanted to go after. And so we thought one of the best ways to break into these accounts, because, you know, all of these accounts that we were talking through had really low engagement. So there've been a few people maybe on the website, maybe someone responded to like a webinar or downloaded an ebook a couple of months ago, but no real sustained level of engagement. And so what we did is we worked with an agency down in Texas, actually, and we created these, it was called the Burner Phone Project, where we had our inside sales rep from each of these companies record a specialized video for X person. And it was uploaded on a cell phone. And then we mailed those cell phones to high-level people at each of these accounts. So when they opened the phone, when they opened the box, and there was a note that, you know, explained to them what was happening in the phone. And then when they turned on the phone, there was a special program on the phone that only played that video. So it's like, hey, Jonathan, I'm Jason from Icertis. And, you know, you go off and there was a whole script, and it was such a fun video to create. You know, we had to like write the scripts. And then, you know, we shot the videos ourselves, you know. So, you know, I know I worked with someone else on the marketing team. You know, we had the script and we were going through and, you know, putting the pieces together and giving feedback, and then created this, and then, you know, sent these out. And the thing with ABM, I think that's always really important to remember, is things don't happen fast, because again, you have long sales cycles. So, you know, we sent these out and we didn't know what was really happening, but then shortly, maybe a month later or a month or two later after sending that project out, one of our salespeople were in a meeting with said company, one of the companies that received one of these phones. And the first thing they told him as he walked into the door is like, we knew you guys were a big marketing team. Like, you know, and then they kind of, two people raised their hands, like 2 people in this room received that cell phone. And like, it was such a great thing. And that's like one of the reasons we're having this meeting with you. And so it was like indirect, you know, it's one of these things you can't measure digitally. You know, you didn't see that direct correlation, but like, you know, he said that. So after the meeting, they came and told us that. And it was just like the biggest thing, because like, you know, you put all this time and you put all this effort, and it was like creative, and, you know, you got these phones together, and, you know, I think it took maybe a month to put everything together. And they had specialized, customized boxes that had our name all over them. And you're just like, okay, now what's going to happen now? And then, you know, you hear, it's like, oh, you actually left a really amazing impression on like the buying team. And we actually found, like, for that particular account, we found the buying team. And which is, is always tough. So there's two people. And actually, I say that now because it's kind of funny, and I can't say the client yet, but that deal actually closed this morning. So that happened like a year ago, and it's kind of going through this long sales cycle, and it actually closed today. So the sales team, they sent something out that had an email that called out that as one of the things, one of the campaigns along the trail of this long sales cycle. So very cool.
Yeah, it sounds really cool. It sounds like it checked off all the boxes outside of being strategic. You said it was creative, it was different, and ultimately now seeing that there's a meeting based off of a campaign you helped, you were a big part of, and then even today closing the client. Obviously, you can't mention it, but that's a big win. I'm super glad. I like that idea a lot too. Like it's kind of like having a lot of things just kind of go off in even my own head. So now kind of segueing into the next part. So you were formerly the marketing director for Here Seattle. So I'm curious, and that's actually initially where you and I met. I believe it was like 2 years ago at one of your guys' meetups. And I'm curious, how did that opportunity come about? And, what was the experience like working for, a nonprofit like that?
Yeah, so it originally started with me, you know, experiencing a lot of the same issues that Here was trying to solve. Here was created to to open up a space and have the dialogue of people who felt alone at tech companies or who felt alone in the workforce and wanted a place of like-minded people to come together. And I was while I found some great friends, when I first moved to Seattle, there was still if you've lived in Texas before and then came over, especially Houston, Texas, of all places, and then came into Seattle, there's like major cultural differences. Like I definitely felt the Seattle freeze. And I came here as a good old Texas boy, talking to everybody, opening doors for people, shaking hands, like the whole nine. I was like a true Texan in that sense. And you but over time you kind of just you felt that you felt that like freeze, and like while you were still making friends, like it just didn't feel like home, and you missed having the people. And one day I was reading a GeekWire article, and it was highlighting the founders of Here, so the four original founders of Here, and they were talking about the organization and what they were doing, and how they met and their website. And as I was reading it, I noticed that everybody on the founding team was from the South. There was a guy from Beaumont, which is a small city outside of Houston, Georgia, Arkansas, Florida, and they were talking about the same things I was talking about. Now, all of a sudden, I was like, I have to join that group. And so I initially started going as just an attendee. I loved the events. I signed up and became a paying member. At that time, you paid for memberships. So I became a paying member immediately and would go into their show. To a lot of their events. And at that time, they were doing like monthly events. And I would talk to, I would go find the founders and just go talk to them. It was like Seth, Todd, Dre, Eric. And every time I would talk to them, we would just like talk. And then at one time I was like, hey, do you guys need help? And it's one of these ideas of just putting yourself out there. Like, hey, do you guys need help? What do you guys need? I have some free time. What's up? And at that time, they had just been looking for someone to manage their communications and their newsletters, and just like their corporate and their community communications. And I was like, I could do that. And so I just started going, and then I did it for a couple of months, and then some people had left, and then it kind of it was really informal still, but some people had left, and they needed someone to take over more of the communications and more of the marketing. So then I kind of just naturally fit into that role, and and the rest is history. I still talk to them all the time. Great group of people, and even though the organization isn't doing as much as they were a couple of years ago, it's the amount of people I've met and the connections I've made because of Here. I mean, even we wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for Here. So it was just a great organization.
Yeah, I think the power of networking is huge, especially given the environment that we're in within tech, but just marketing in general. I think sometimes I agree, it gets lonely, especially for you since you had moved from, a different part of the States and then, having to come here and trying to find, okay, how do I make this feel like home? I think that's great perspective, great advice for anybody who maybe even just moved here or maybe somewhere else. And just for a change of scenery and seeing what that's like is getting involved. Obviously, given the given pandemic, there's a lot of things on freeze, but there's a lot more groups online, different, virtual events that are going on where you can network and meet different people. So I think that's really good perspective there. The last two questions before we hit the rapid fire questions. I'm curious, now having the experience that you've had, what are some of the skills or characteristics, you've worked in different companies. What are some of the skills and characteristics you believe allow for a marketer to really stick out, whether it's, within a crowded marketing, team, or even like a one-man band who, like, the CEO, the executive team's looking, okay, should we keep this guy on? Is this worth it right now? What are some of those key skills and characteristics you think a marketer should have to stick out?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, just a strong level of curiosity. Marketing is this ever evolving field. 8 years ago when I started, digital marketing was barely a thing. And now it's like a must need skill. And now ABM, 4 years ago, ABM has just started to become a thing. And I predict, in 10 years, ABM will be the only type of marketing B2B companies do. It just makes sense for B2B, right? And so it just picking up and just realizing that marketing is this ever evolving field. There's constantly new channels, there's constantly new strategies, there's constantly new ways to connect with people, and it's always going to evolve. So just having this really strong, high level of curiosity to continue learning and continue to pick up on skills and continuing to just move to where the people are going. TikTok's becoming a thing now. When it wasn't a thing, podcast advertising is huge now. Like 5 years ago, podcasts were barely hitting they were there, but they were all entertainment. And now, like, almost every business has a podcast. So, like, understanding and being able to pick up on these trends and just being curious on what people are doing and where people are connecting, because that's kind of what I've distilled from being in marketing for so long, is that marketing is always going to happen where people connect. So always wanting to go find where people connect, whether that's, it was Facebook 10 years ago, and right now it's like Twitter and TikTok and Instagram, and who knows what it's going to be in 5 years from now. And so just like, strong levels of curiosity. We've mentioned this idea of just wanting to hone skills. If you can do stuff, if you can produce, if you can create, you're always going to find a place in marketing. And then networking. I think what's really great about marketing is it's probably the group of some of the most friendliest people, because everybody's just excited and everybody loves collaborating and everybody likes trying new things. Everyone wants to learn from people, and so just keeping a strong network of marketers out there. You never know when someone needs something, whether it's a freelance job or they need to hire somebody, or you just never know what's happening. And always just keeping a strong network of people. And even if it's just to bounce an idea off of, like, the amount of times I call people in my network just to ask them, like, hey, how did you handle this A/B testing program? Like, you did A/B testing. What did you do for A/B testing? And just finding these areas to learn from each other. And, because we like to think we know the answer to everything, but more than likely we don't. And more than likely someone else already did it, and they probably did it better than you. So, like, this is going, if you could drop that ego and just go out and learn from people, then it's always going to make you a very strong marketer.
Yeah, I think those 2 points are super solid, and I honestly, it sounds like this last question I'm going to ask you. I feel like those two kind of go hand in hand, but I'm curious if you were to talk directly to Jason fresh out of college, 2008, in the middle of recession. What advice would you tell him about marketing, about everything you've learned up to this point? Whether it's any, like, limiting beliefs, some mindset stuff, technical skills, all these things. Like, what advice would you tell him specifically?
I would tell Jason to go become as technical as possible, especially being young. Like, the younger you are, the easier things like design become, the easier things like teaching yourself to code is. and Because I think your brain is fresher and you can absorb a lot more information, but then also like you have the time. Like, when I was at work, when I was trying to find a job in 2008, I was working retail. I was working retail part-time, looking for a job part-time, and then partying and stuff full-time. In reality, I probably should have been like, I should have taken that time to say, okay, I'm gonna go and learn as much about coding as I could. I'm gonna go and learn much about design as I could. And I'm gonna become a great code, whether it's JavaScript or even I went into back end stuff. It's just like any little thing you're interested in, music recording, just like try to pick up as many skills as you can in that world. And then everything else, the management piece, the project management piece, the quorum of just how to operate in it. And that'll all come with age, and maturity. But like, again, once you pick up those things, like you just become unstoppable. And some of the greatest marketers I know now are not just marketers. They're, musicians. They are, artists or photographers. They have such a wide level of interest outside of like their job of marketing. And that's what makes them such strong marketers.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because like I've been meeting a lot more marketers who aren't only marketers. They have a lot of things outside of marketing that they do and interests and I think that's really good because I feel like it all plays together. Like something that may have inspired you in some sort of photography, music, or art, could potentially inspire some sort of campaign in the future based off of what there. So it's kind of cross functional.
Exactly.
So now as we transition to the last part of this interview, which is the rapid fire questions, my first question to you is, what is your current favorite marketing tool or software that you're using?
I would have to say Engagio. And so this is this is for anyone who doesn't know Engagio. It's an ABM software tool. And this is where you can find all the collection of all the sales and marketing activity that are hitting certain accounts. So this is every morning, what's the first software I log into, and I'm really checking, how are my campaigns responding across different target accounts.
Great. So now then, the second question is, what is your favorite either online marketing course or maybe even a course that you took in during your MBA or even undergrad?
In my MBA, I think one course that was really powerful. Now looking back at it, it was way ahead of its time. Was a social justice and business course, and so at that point, we were looking beyond just donating money and doing, the philanthropy part, but then how do you really drive diversity and inclusion within a business and make it core to what a business does? And what was great about that is just I'd taken that class in Navy now like 5 years ago, and it was just it created a free space for people to come there and not feel the pressure to have to know everything and could be a little bit ignorant and ask questions, and everyone came with a really open heart. And it was just this way for people to, and it kind of like even to this day frames the way I talk about social justice issues now of, you want to learn, you want to learn what's happening. You want to know what's, how the right way to talk about things, and even the way to talk about things when you don't know things. And especially now in the world, like now, finally 5 years later, a lot of the stuff we were talking about then is coming to fruition now. You can look at it with this more critical eye. And, it's still one of like the most unique business school classes I've ever taken.
Super relevant then, super relevant now, and super relevant moving to the future. So I'm glad you said that. So what is your favorite marketing or business book that you've read up to this point?
Foundational. I wanted to go into marketing because I was in advertising. I loved advertising. Mad Men. I thought I wanted to be a digital Don Draper. So Ogilvy on advertising. And then, which is just a classic advertising book, and just a really great way to how do you think about ads and when you're creating that.
Now, the last question of the rapid fire questions is, who's your favorite marketer? Somebody either directly or someone you've admired from afar.
Yeah. To bring this conversation full circle, Airbnb Experiences. They're the head of Airbnb Experience, the CMO, a guy named Musa Tariq. And I think he's probably as far as a contemporary marketer, I think he is, one of my favorite marketers for, a variety of different reasons. He's had, he's had a very unique career, and similar to mine, where he started off in, well, I didn't start off in fashion, but I started off in some field that wasn't technology, and he started off as fashion and worked for like Nike and Burberry and did fashion marketing for like retail, which was always my dream job as a marketer when I was younger. And then moved into automotive and did stuff with technology. I mean, with Ford, and then leveraged and became like Ford's youngest CMO ever. And then now is heading up Airbnb experiences. And he just has this really interesting way of always looking and learning. I follow him on Twitter. I've listened to a few of his podcasts, and he's had this really interesting way of learning and applying completely different experiences and completely different like frames of reference to help solve a problem or to help drive the current strategy. And then on top of all that, he has a really cool sneaker collection. So like if you ever see him talk or watch a video of his, he's always rocking like really dope shoes.
Now, if people are interested in learning more about what you do and connecting with you, what platform you mentioned Twitter, but what are some of the platforms you interact with that people can connect with you on?
Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn's always I think it's just easy, because it's connected to professional, but LinkedIn's always a good place to hit me. And then email, so you can always send me an email. Always send me an email, and I'm pretty good at responding to those.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks for coming on this call, Jason. I really appreciate you sharing all your knowledge, experiences, as well as some of the resources and campaigns that have been successful to you. So thanks for coming on today.
Yeah, no problem.